All I'm going to say is, if you hear that phone, it's me, because we called this. We called this in a couple of months ago. In fact, we've been telling you about this, of the likelihood of this bill potentially being dropped completely, or essentially not really passing, to a point where it looks like it's passed, but in reality, the bill would do nothing. And this is what I fully expect, because now the person in charge is not Jacob Rees-Mogg, it's Kemi Badenoch. She's in charge. What I expect to see potentially over maybe the next coming weeks or months is that Badenoch will maybe drop this bill, but what she will do is that there are EU bills which are really only sort of specifically apply to, well, being in Europe. So we can actually drop them. So she will announce that, oh, we're getting rid of all these EU laws, which, well, really, now that we are out of Europe, it's sort of completely useless. They don't really serve any function, but it's not as long, shall we say, as the list that Jacob Rees-Mogg would like to sort of get rid of, which, as we said before, would blow massive holes in laws and regulations, and as we've said before, probably start a trade war with Europe. And that's just before you even think about how the fact that this bill completely cuts out any scrutiny from the House of Commons or even the House of Lords, which is one of the big points of contention about this bill from the word go. Even other Brexiteers looked at this bill and thought, this is a bit unnecessary. So there is a big rebellion over this currently in the House of Lords that the government is having to face up to, because they know, by all accounts, it looks like they're going to lose if they do not give in to concessions on this. And by the looks of it, the Lords that are rebelling about this intend to make this bill so completely toothless that even though it might pass, essentially this bill will just mean nothing. And that's why I highly suspect you'll probably see Kemi Badenoch at some point in the near future come out and say, oh, we've got rid of all these EU laws. Aren't we good? Aren't we delivering on Brexit? So expect that in the near future as well. So, like I say, I'll put in a phone call for maybe a couple of months' time. So we'll put that to one side for now. But we'll get into reading more about what's going on here, and of course this rebellion that is going on about this bill, because it does look like the retained EU law bill is going to be ditched. So, as always, before we do go into this, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a rotation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee as well. Below, there's the Pony Club and the YouTube thank you button as well. So, as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help and support the channel. Even if you do, just click the like and share button. Like I say, that always helps out. And of course, remember to leave a comment down below as well. So, let's crack on with this, because this is what we expected. This is what we expected a couple of weeks ago, to be honest. Well, not a couple of weeks ago. What we've been talking about would probably happen to this bill, that it would be maybe quietly shuffled off into the long reads. And this is, I think, what's going to eventually happen. So, this comes from The Guardian with the plans of government retreats from Brexit bill plan to ditch EU laws. Ministers have begun a full-scale retreat over the post-Brexit plans to ditch thousands of EU laws by the end of the year. After Tory peers, this is where it comes from, because always the House of Lords was very, very much full of Tory peers who were very much pro-European, who understood that actually us being in Europe was a positive thing. So it is no shock to see that it is Tory peers who are rebelling against this bill. So the Tory peers have warned that they would join a mass cross-party revolt in the House of Lords. The Observer can reveal that the government has dropped plans to hold the report stage of the Brexiteers' retained EU law bill in the Lords soon after Easter, apparently to prevent a row in the run-up to the local elections on the May the 4th, and to allow it time to consider at least a list of likely concessions to the rebels. While such a climb down will risk angering the hardline Tory Brexiteers, including the bill's original champion, Jacob Rees-Mogg. The extent of the opposition to it from the business, environmental groups, unions, and Brussels has left ministers with no option but to consider delay and moving it to a scaled down and less hurried version. No new dates have currently been set for the report stage, and peers do now believe the much criticised bill could be put back by months and possibly beyond the next general election. So that essentially means this bill is dead. As we said, it's been kicked into the long grass. Now, this is going to upset a lot of hardcore Brexiteers, but as you see, this bill ain't passing the House of Lords. This bill is not passing the House of Lords. And if it cannot pass the House of Lords, I do not see Rishi Sunak even daring to attempt to try and use sort of Parliament's bill where they can sort of bypass the House of Lords, but they've got to have not only does every single, I think it's what is it? I think we're going to have an 80% majority from what I believe to be able to bypass the Lords. At least from what I remember, they've got to have like an 80% majority, and that's pretty much like almost a unanimous vote in the Commons. That's not going to happen. Even with that big majority, that's not going to happen. The very likelihood of that happening is not possible. So, like I say, this bill at this point has been kicked to the long grass, and thank God it has been kicked into the long grass, because we have been warning about the problems this bill would cause for whole swathes of laws, rules, regulations, massive problems for businesses, just bills, just rules, laws, regulations just disappearing overnight. So, under the bill's provisions, more than 4,000, and there were more, the civil servants said, well, it was originally like 2,000, but then they found more. And they even said, look, there's chances of there would probably even be more this might apply to. So it's not just 4,000. So it was probably significantly more than that. So the bill that would, under these provisions, would more than 4,000 EU laws currently kept on the UK statute book after Brexit to ensure continuity would automatically be scrapped at the end of the year unless ministers decided there should be exemptions. A key complaint is the way that this would cut both houses of Parliament out of the decisions and on which EU laws should be ditched, ceding the power to unelected civil servants and ministers. This, despite the fact that Rees-Mogg and his fellow Brexiteers said that after leaving the EU would be a way of restoring sovereignty to Parliament. And of course, we all knew, we all said it before, this line was complete and utter bogusness. The idea that they wanted to restore sovereignty to Parliament when Rees-Mogg was trying to pass such a bill which would completely eliminate that sovereignty just goes to show you they've lost every single argument they have ever made on Brexit. So, a group of Labour, Tory, and Liberal Democrats and crossbench peers have been meeting in secret for weeks for how to amend the bill, while Tory and other peers are not keen to be seen on conducting their arguments in public. These issues have united both pro-Brexit Conservatives, such as the former Tory minister Ackley Hamilton, and leading Remainers, such as Patrick Cormack and the former Transport Secretary Patrick McLaughlin. In a speech at the second reading of the bill, Lord Cormack described it as a constitutional monstrosity. David Hope, a former deputy president of the UK Supreme Court who sits as a crossbencher and has tabled a series of amendments, told The Observer he was not interested in scoring political points or arguments involving the Brexit versus Remain, but he was acting for the good of the country. And like I say, here's the thing. When you look at the whole Brexit versus Remain argument, if you act in the good of the country, well, guess what? Brexit doesn't happen. But I suppose that's a bigger point for another time. But yeah, there we go. Anyway, he went on to say this. I do not have a political agenda with regard to this bill, but my general concern is the way the accuracy and the workability of legislation. And the way this bill is currently being framed is not capable of doing the job it is designed to do, he said. Another senior Tory, with knowledge of the recent talks with the government figures on the future of this bill, also added, "What I can tell you is that discussions are going on at the highest levels, and ministers are aware that if they do not make concessions, then there is the prospect of the government being defeated." Another source in the Lord said this: "The penny has now dropped with number 10. There is a recognition that unless they make concessions, they are in a baby out with the bathwater territory. They will be causing legal chaos on many fronts for the sake of pleasing Rees-Mogg and the Tory right." And like I say, Rishi Sunak does not want to do this because this bill, if it passed, would cause huge problems. Huge problems. This is why there was such the alarm bells sounding off against this. And even though many Tories were sort of spoke openly against this bill, didn't stop many of them voting against it, unfortunately, because again, they were worried that if they did not vote for this, then maybe their Brexit credentials would be questioned. That you're not a true Brexiteer, how dare you? And again, it sort of reopened those whole Brexit dividing lines on this bill when it was originally voted for going through Parliament. So the concern has also been raised within the government departments over the amount of civil service time that this bill would that has been taking, and recently the way the legal fallout would complicate Rishi Sunak's recently signed Windsor Framework deal with Brussels on the operation of the Northern Ireland Protocol. Senior figures in Brussels have also weighed in, saying that if the environmental and other standards are allowed to fall in the UK, threatening the so-called level playing field, this could seriously undermine the UK's post-Brexit trade deal with the EU and potentially lead to a trade war. And that was the whole point of the bill. They wanted to lower the environmental standards. They wanted to lower all these standards. That was the whole point of this bill. It wasn't to get rid of EU laws. It was to get rid of as much regulation as they possibly could, because they knew they couldn't get rid of it all. But they knew that if you try and sort of load all these into like a, think of it as the end of the crystal maze where all the papers are blowing around. They knew that no matter how hard these people try and save those rules and regulations, which they hate, they know they can only save so much. So they knew that maybe they get rid of 40% of these regulations, but that's enough for them, because that's their aim. Because now they can go and start to take out more regulations as they go along with these powers that they have from this bill. That was always, I think, the grand plan for it. So it continues. A government spokesperson denied that there was any retreat underway, saying that we are fully committed to the retained EU law bill and a key part of delivering our commitment to removing and reforming the burdensome retained EU law. Once passed, the bill will enable the country to further seize the opportunities of Brexit by ensuring that regulations fit the needs of the UK, helping to drive the economy, growth, and innovation. And of course, as we said at the beginning of this, the bill is now the responsibility of Kemi Badenoch, the Business Trade Secretary. One idea to be understood, to be under consideration, is for Badenoch to announce in the coming months a list of obviously redundant EU laws that could be abolished without controversy, and hail this as a symbolic move as proof that ministers were delivering on Brexit. Another idea is to extend the sunset clause, under which laws would cease to apply by at least another year, taking them beyond the likely date of the next general election, meaning the bill would in effect never come into force. And within the civil service, officials say that that is inevitable that most of the EU laws will be retained. So there you have it. I think this bill is being kicked to the long grass. I cannot see this going through. I think if you've got such a major rebellion in the Lords, the idea that you've got Tory peers who are saying, well, we're going to have our discussions more in private because we don't want to have these our arguments aired in public. I think says a lot about how bad this bill is going to be defeated, I think, in the Lords. And unless I think serious concessions get made, And we are talking some big, serious concessions. Like, this bill does not pass in its original form that certainly Jacob Rees-Mogg would like it to apply to. I think the whole getting rid of parliamentary scrutiny, I think that's going to be completely stripped out, which again kills the original idea of the bill completely. I think even if they do extend the sunset clause by 2 years, well, even then it's ended. I can see, as was said there, Badnoch just going out and saying, "Oh yeah, we've got rid of all these EU laws," and then very quietly this bill just gets shuffled away. Just put it put it in a box somewhere. We'll just ignore it. I think that's what happens. But yeah, like I say, we'll be keeping a very close eye on what happens to this. But I've said this before. I do not think this survives. I do not think this survives the Lords at all. So, as always, thank you very much for watching, and of course, please do remember to click that like, share, and subscribe button, and of course, down below, links to my Patreon page, the donation link where you can buy me a coffee, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, the Pony Club down below as well. So, as always, thank you very much for watching, and of course, we'll see you all next time.